And this is a bit of a game changer when you do it and you get annoyed at yourself for not thinking of it sooner. So even within the regular split squat, there's an almost infinite number of variations that we can kind of work with there. But there's going to be a couple of key tenets that we want to see staying the same. What's up, guys? Today's video is all about single leg training. And I know you hate it, I hate it, we all hate it. But unfortunately, it's very important. So if we are going to make ourselves do single leg training, we may as well make sure that we're doing it as well as humanly possible to get the absolute biggest benefit from it. And then maybe if we do it better, we can also get away with doing a little bit less of it, right? So let's go to this with an open mind. So why would we bother doing single leg training in the first place? It's uncomfortable, takes twice as long, our ego takes a hit, get out of breath, all these other horrible things, right? But the truth is that, first off, pretty much all of us have a side-to-side imbalance, both the arms and the legs. And this tends to get worse in the lower body because, we're standing all day, we tend to have a dominant side that we kind of lean on and favor. And then a lot of the time, this ends up creeping into our loaded movements then as well. Like we're squatting, we see people shifting to one side. Even on deadlifting, we'll be favoring one side. That can result in, lower back pain, hip pain, knee pain, all these other things on one side then because we're favoring it and leaving that other side understimulated and underdeveloped. So it gives us an opportunity to get rid of that side-to-side imbalance, keep ourselves more even, and then that allows us to go and do the fun things that we want to do considerably more. The other thing that the single leg training allows us to do is to spend some time in internal rotation. Pretty much everything we do in terms of lower body training in the gym involves our hips and our femurs being in external rotation. So, our feet are angled out away from each other. And, that's exactly how it should be when we're squatting and doing our hip hinges, etc. The problem is that if we only ever do loaded movements in external rotation, we get very weak at being in internal rotation, which a lot of the time leaves us with quite underdeveloped adductors and leaves us with an imbalance across the hip then that can limit our hip mobility and lead to a lot of things like hip impingements and again lower back pain, etc. as our training career goes on. So the split squat training, single leg training, whatever you want to call it, allows us to spend some time in that internally rotated position. Again, if nothing else, keeping our hips and lower back kind of healthier so that we can continue to operate at a high level on those bilateral movements, okay? But then also we need to think that when it comes to these single leg training exercises, the upper ceiling of our capabilities with them is actually a lot higher than we think. They have a lot more room for potential in terms of hypertrophy and for strength than we tend to think. Like, it's not uncommon to see people doing double bodyweight Bulgarian split squats in the athletic or the sports performance world, for example. Whereas most of us kind of like get quite happy working up to, whatever we do, we're like, oh, that counts as good, 80-pound dumbbells or whatever it might be, like that's strong. But the reality is like there are athletes out there doing Bulgarian split squats with double or sometimes even triple their body weight, on SS yoke bars and that type of thing for reps. So the upper ceiling there is way higher than we like to give it credit for, which means not only are they a better tool for getting strong and jacked than we think, but also we are probably underperforming way more on these than we think we should. So maybe we need to just kind of man up a little bit and make a bit more effort there, right? So what we're going to do is go into how we can execute the split squat in slightly different ways, because there's a lot of nuance to a split squat, and then we'll go through to the kind of the more common variations that are used so that we can make sure that we're performing these properly and optimally so that we can get the most out of them. So let's first look at the most basic derivative of single leg training, right? The split squat. But there's a bit more nuance here than we think, and I'm going to show you what I mean by this now. So if I get into what would be just a kind of typical split squat position, note that when I'm doing this, both feet are internally rotated. So remember in the intro, we talked about how the split squat is a good opportunity for us to spend some time in internal rotation, get strong in these positions, strengthen our adductors, and keep our hips healthy. So front foot is angled across the body. The back foot is also angled across the body, okay? So that's important to note and make sure that that stays the same way throughout. The back leg is bent and the back foot is up as high on tiptoes as it can be. We're not trying to start closer to the ground and then bring the heel up, so on and so forth. We basically want as few moving parts as humanly possible. So if I just do a traditional split squat now with no real specific intent, we can just kind of drop down like so, and we can create a split squat that is kind of evenly shared in terms of the musculature that it recruits. Depending on how you're built, like for me, with long legs, it's going to be a little bit more posterior chain. Someone with short legs will be a little bit more upright and get a little bit less hip flexion, will be more quad dominant, but it's kind of reasonably shared. However, I can stay in this exact same stance now. And now when I drop down, instead of thinking just do a split squat, I'm going to think drive the front knee forward as far as I can. So now instead, the movement's going to look a little bit different. And now what we're going to see is this. Considerably more forward knee travel. So now it's become more of a knee forward and knee back movement as opposed to up and down. So what that's going to do now is load the quad more, even though I haven't actually changed the stance or anything else that I'm doing. And then by the same token, then we can change it the other direction, and I can start at the top here. I can put a tiny little bit of hip flexion at the start position, and now when I focus on sitting back, now we can see that that front knee has very little, if maybe almost no, forward knee travel at all. So now in this position, I'm getting considerably more hip extension. So I'm loading the glutes primarily a lot more there. So even within the most basic variation, just the split squat, we can tweak the muscles that we work the most by changing the intent that we use. Now, we could even take that a step further and say, well, you know, if this was my kind of regular split squat stance, but I want to focus more on forward knee travel, I could bring that stance in and go a little bit narrower, and that will allow me to force even more forward knee travel. Or if I wanted to make it even more posterior chain dominant, I could extend that stride out a tiny bit more. And then when I hinge back, I can hinge back even further. And now I can actually get my shin to have a backwards angle in that position. So even within the regular split squat, there's an almost infinite number of variations that we can kind of work with there. But there's going to be a couple of key tenets that we want to see staying the same. And that's going to be that when we set up, what we want to see is, we've already mentioned the feet being internally rotated. And I want you to treat it like if you drew a line down the midline of your body, like this. Say you've got like you're standing either side of a single railway track. When you set up for your split squat, that's how I want you to bring your feet forward and back. I don't want to see us going out here like this. We're going to be here. I'm going to pretty much just go directly forward and directly back. So the feet are kind of either side of this imaginary midline, okay? That's going to allow us to align the hips considerably better and get the most range of motion. The downside, which is really an upside in truth, is that's going to give us less artificial stability, because obviously our base of support is narrow. But a lot of the time people are going excessively wide, obviously this is an exaggeration, because they're unstable in the first place. But a big part of the reason that we're doing this is because we want to become stable. So we're here, go forward and back. Now from this position, both feet internally rotated, feet either side of that midline, set the spine nice and tall. And now as you go down, whatever variation of the split squat you're doing, the goal is to get the kneecap pointing in the same direction as like your second or third toe. So we want to see it moving forward and tracking in line, you know, just like we would if we were doing a bilateral squat or any other movement. We want to see the femur and the knee moving in line with the ankle and the foot. Now again, what will be really common here is because we're so used to twisting out, you know, every time we squat we're here and it's twist out, twist the knees out, glutes, etc., etc. Whereas in this split squat, what we're actually trying to do is load the adductors a little bit more and stay in internal rotation. So we're doing the opposite. If anything, we're not thinking twist out here at all. What we're trying to do is keep pressure on the instep here and keep that knee, tracking in line with the foot. And now when we go down, we should have enough mobility that we can make contact with the ground with that back knee. That needs to be like this, a soft contact point. We don't want to see like that, okay? Because that's showing that we're running out of control and stability in that bottom range of motion. Again, remember, big part of the reason we're doing this, balance and stability. So if we're going down and then just collapsing, the knee's hitting the ground, the chest is coming forward, the upper back is collapsing, we're not getting a lot of the benefits that we really want to get out of this movement. Okay, so those would be the basics of executing a decent split squat. It's going to be feet either side of that imaginary midline. Feet internally rotated, the front knee tracking in line with the second or third toe of that front foot, and then the spine staying long and the shoulders staying wide. In terms of how much knee flexion, how much hip flexion, that's going to be entirely dependent on your goals, your body proportions, and what you're trying to hit with that movement. So you can play with that as much as you want, but what we're going to do now is show you a couple of other variations that you can use to exaggerate that even more. The first derivative now of the split squat that we're going to look at is the front foot elevated split squat. But again, there's a little bit of nuance here because the degree of front foot elevation that we use can pretty drastically alter what we end up biasing. So remember, when we do that regular split squat, we can hinge into it a little bit more, we can push a little bit more forward knee extension, and we can bias the quad or the hip depending on what it is that we want to do. And with the front foot elevated split squat, we can actually do the same thing here. So when people ask a question like how much elevation, the answer is, well, what do you want to work? What I mean by that is if we look at, say, a bench here now, I can set up here in what is a front foot elevated split squat. So once again, feet are kind of either side of that midline, both internally rotated, nice and tall. As I go down into this split squat, there's not really a lot of forward knee travel here, but look how low my hip is relative to that front knee. Like my hip has dropped down very low. So, you know, it's kind of like being in the very bottom of a very low unilateral squat, right? So this is going to be a really glute dominant position to push out of because we have this really high elevation here that allows the hip to sink so far below the knee. Now we do a front foot elevated split squat on just a small little bumper plate, maybe one or two at most. What we're going to do now is basically allow us to get more range of motion before that back knee ends up hitting the floor and force a little bit more forward knee travel. So what we can do here now is when I go forward here, I can actually get considerably more forward knee travel than I can when I'm doing it with both feet on the floor. So this now is going to be a more quad dominant split squat because I'm able to get that knee tracking further forward over my toe. So again, front foot elevated split squat is a really good variation to use, but which one you're going to use, or sorry, how much elevation you're going to use, is going to depend on your goal. If you're looking to get as much glute out of it as possible, then using something that is kind of around knee height or just below is going to give you a good range of motion and target the glute really well. If you imagine I was doing this up on a box that was, you know, really high, I don't really have anywhere to travel. So even though it's technically more glute dominant, there's almost no range of motion, so it ends up being a bit of a waste of time. But anything that's around just below knee height tends to work very well here. Whereas if we want to do this very quad dominant version of a front foot elevated split squat, anything like a bumper plate, a 1 or a 2 inch box is going to be more than enough to get that extra desired forward knee travel that we're looking for in the bottom. Once this gets too tall, what we'll see is over time, as this grows up, this shin angle will come back and it will slowly start to mimic what we see here on the bench there with almost no forward knee travel at all. So now let's take this apart, and what we'll do now is go over the dreaded Bulgarian split squat and see how that's different. Right, so up next is the Bulgarian split squat. And we know as soon as an exercise has like an Eastern European name or anything like that, we know it's going to be rough. And Bulgarians definitely live up to that expectation. Now, these are probably the best single leg variation that you can do. It gives us a really good blend of anterior and posterior chain. Works the adductors very, very well. And for anyone who has any athletic goals, or sprinting, running, etc., these are going to be a really, really good tool for you. However, a lot of the time we're not getting as much out of them as we could be because we're not executing them well. So the biggest problem that people have actually is just getting their stance right. So let's just knock that out of the park straight away because this is really easy, right? I'm using a bench here, but again, anything kind of like when we did the front foot elevated split squat a minute ago, anything that's kind of like just below knee height will work perfectly fine here. In this case, it's a bench. You're going to stand with your calves against the thing that you're using, feet internally rotated, put your leg out in front and fall forward. Near as down, that's going to put you where you need to be or very, very close to, okay? So from that position now, the front foot is set, it's an internal rotation, and we're going to put that back foot up on the lip of the bench there, okay? So remember, the goal of this Bulgarian split squat is to get quite an even distribution of load between like the quad, the adductor, and the glute. However, when most people do them, what they're going to do is going to set, even if they get their stance right like this, and then they do this. Okay? Because they want to stay perfectly upright, and they think, right, this is my Bulgarian split squat. Well, first off, how much range of motion can you get when you do that? Because all we're doing is bending through the knee and not the hip. And then because you're only bending through the knee and not the hip, you're basically turning it into like a limited range of motion quad dominant split squat. So you're not getting a good range of motion, you're only getting, should we say, stimulation for one of those muscle groups where you could be targeting 3 or 4. So instead, what I would want to see is, again, let's set the stance, fall forward and catch yourself, foot goes up on the edge. To encourage you to actually use the hip, start with a little bit of hip flexion. So we're going to be here, just that, that's it, all it has to be. So this is me bolt upright, 5 degrees, whatever that ends up being, okay? Just enough to soften the hip and get my weight shifting a little bit back. Now from this position, think of it a little bit more like a sitting back maneuver. So from here now, rather than staying bolt upright and doing this, just pushing that forward and staying up, I'm gonna start here. Now as I hinge back, and I think about getting that back knee and that back shin back towards the bench, now I can get to this position here. Still got a tiny bit of forward knee travel, but I've got a lot more hip flexion. I'm getting a lot more through the glute and adductor now compared to the quad. Now you don't have to exaggerate it quite as much as I am now. Again, you could be shifted very slightly further forward, but the point is that just by starting with that really small amount of hip flexion there, now we can hinge back and you'll feel your weight kind of shift more back towards the heel on that front foot. And now you're going to get not only considerably more range of motion, but you're also going to get considerably more work for the glute and the adductor, which is the primary thing that we're trying to get out of this variation by elevating the back foot. So when you're doing your Bulgarian split squats, the goal is not to stay really upright, not to force as much forward knee travel as possible, but it's almost like you're trying to mimic like a sprint start position. So you're here, hips are flexed and then go down, and then here, kind of in that semi sprint start position there, so you can push up with the glute, the adductor and the quad at that bottom position. That's going to make them way more effective and have much better carryover to whatever it is that you're doing them for. Okay, so we've done split squat, front foot elevated split squat, and rear foot elevated split squat. So what's next? Up next is kind of the middle ground between your split squats and your bilateral work. So this is going to be a kickstand squat. Now the reason you might do this is because by kind of getting towards a pseudo bilateral stance, we can move more load and we can get considerably better depth than we could do on the equivalent variation of a bilateral squat. So basically what we're doing is going most of the way back to a bilateral squat, and you'll see what I mean here. So if this is our split squat stance here, instead what we're going to do now is bring that back foot in until the toes of the back foot are basically in line with the heel of the front foot. But just like we talked about with the split squat, we are still staying in that internally rotated position. So this allows us to actually get some squatting volume in internal rotation, which is pretty cool. So then what we're going to do from this position is pretty much the same as what we focused on with the split squat, but now obviously it's going to be a lot more quad dominant and it's going to be a lot of forward knee travel because we're making this into a squat variation now. So the back foot is, again, as high up on tiptoes as it can be. The back knee is bent. I'm going to do a goblet squat, but you could do whatever variation you wish. And then from there, we want that knee tracking in line with that second toe of the front foot, and then keeping nice and tall and keeping that front leg in internal rotation. Now, what we're getting out of this is that there is going to be more loading potential here because you have a more stable base than in a split squat where your stance is further apart. Now, if you want to load this up considerably, go watch the Zercher video that we did a while ago, where we talk about how you can use the Zercher bar position for split squats. You could also use that here for your kickstand squats too. Now, the other benefit that you're going to get out of this is it's still going to be 70 to 80% of the load on that front leg. You know, if we're going to do a regular front foot elevated split squat, we could probably say that like at least 90% of the load and the work is falling on that front leg, which is what we want. So when we go back here now to this B stance, because that back leg is closer in, it is going to take more of the load, but there's still the vast majority of it being done by that front leg. So it gives us the ability to train a much greater range of motion. It gets us to train a squat pattern in that internally rotated state while still primarily working a unilateral pattern. Now we can also take this stance and apply it to a hinge as well. We can very easily do a kickstand Romanian or stiff leg deadlift, and this would look the exact same in many ways. So we're going to start here. So both feet are in internal rotation. That back knee is bent, back foot is up on tiptoes. Now instead of squatting down, from here now we're going to hinge back. So again, it's probably 70 to 80% of that work is being done on the front leg. And now we get to train a hinge pattern in internal rotation in a unilateral manner, which is going to be really beneficial for anyone who has any form of bilateral imbalance. Now, if you find that you need to do some kind of unilateral hinge work for your hamstrings, your adductors, your glutes, whatever it might be, the go-to for most people is going to be like maybe a single leg RDL or something like that. The problem with for most is that ends up being so immensely unstable, it's got almost no loading potential, which if you're trying to mainly work balance might be fine, but if we're over here trying to get stronger and more muscular, then we probably need a little bit more load than that. Then that's where this kickstand RDL comes in here, because this can be loaded way, way more than that single leg RDL. We could do this with a trap bar or anything like that as well and get considerably more loading potential out of that. And if you are worried about the balance aspect, you want to take that out and you just want to be able to use more load on this, then you could very simply do it against a wall or something like that, where now instead of having that back leg down here on the floor, you can have the back leg planted on the wall behind you. So you've got an anchor point back here now. So as you hinge back, you've got an anchor point to lean into and get considerably more out of it. So that's just yet another kind of option on the spectrum between completely unilateral over here and your traditional bilateral work. These can be a really good intermediary. Or if you're someone who's kind of new to squatting and is struggling with depth, struggling with mobility, struggling with stability, kickstand squats can be a really good intermediary then between split squats and the bilateral squats that help you bridge that gap there. We've gone over a whole bunch of different split squat unilateral variations there. A big problem comes a lot of the time when we start doing these begrudgingly, and we might get quite strong on them and have to, start using a decent amount of weight. And then holding these big cumbersome dumbbells not only is just annoying, it throws you off balance really badly. But a big part of the reason we're struggling with that balance aspect here is because one of the dumbbells is way over here, right? So I've got all my pressure pretty much is on this front leg. My anchor point is on the left-hand side of my body, and I've got all this load hanging over here, which is pulling me over away from my anchor point. So to help get around this, really all you have to do, and this is a bit of a game changer when you do it and you get annoyed at yourself for not thinking of it sooner, this dumbbell comes over against the front leg here. So this one is hanging down by the side because this is already on the anchored side. That's good. This one comes across the body. If this is a really big, heavy dumbbell, it takes up a lot of space. You can just go ahead and prop it right against your knee or your quad on this other leg. And now as you squat down, you keep this one over here. So now all of the weight is balanced over my anchor point. So now I haven't got this big cumbersome weight floating out here away that's trying to pull me over. Now I'm fully centered over that working leg and that working foot. And you're going to be able to be moving not only much greater loads, but be a lot more stable in that position as well. And it's going to eliminate a lot of the postural problems we see with as people get tired, they start leaning away or getting pulled away from that working side leg. So that can be a bit of a game changer there for your split squats, having that dumbbell pulled over in front of your body closer to that working leg. Give it a go and let us know how you get on.